Hello students, this is your instructor James from Strategic Presentation, and you're watching the header image demonstration for fall 2019. This video will cover how to make a header image for your WordPress website in Strategic Presentation. We're going to be making headers. Here you see an example of a header image for WordPress that I made last semester. We have another example from an older website that I made a few semesters ago. And we also see here my current website that I'm working on this semester, which doesn't have a header yet. So we're going to make a header. This is going to fulfill the week 5 WordPress blog post header and image editing. And keep in mind, after we edit the image, we will still need to make a blog post about the image. For an example, you can take a look at some of my older posts about headers, about the header, and I'll send out these I'll send out these in the email later. Okay, so when you're ready to get started, you'll go over to week 5 readings and make sure you have downloaded the guide to image editing. When you open up the guide to image editing, you'll see something like this, Image Editing Quick Start Guide. This document will outline the steps needed to create your header. And I want to take a note here that if you're familiar with other layer-based image editing software, you're welcome to use it. The key will be you need to make sure that your image fulfills the following requirements, no matter how you make it. Number 1, it has to be sized correctly. So you need to use good, properly sized and high-resolution source images so that you don't get the images all pixelated and stretched out when you use them. And 2, you need multiple layers. And if you've done the Manovich and the Davison readings, you'll probably have some idea of the difference between layer-based images, like you can make with something akin to Photoshop, or in our case Pixlr, versus flat bitmap images like you would make with something like MS Paint. And we'll talk about that more in class. For now, let's get into the primary knowledge, things you'll need to know. So last week we covered issues related to licensing and Creative Commons. Today we're going to go over 2 popular sources for Creative Commons licensed images, one of which is Advanced Search on Google and the other is Creative Commons on Flickr. Also, I'll flag before we get too far in that you'll need to always cite your image sources. Here's an example of how to cite it, which you can obviously go back and refer to in your own copy of these instructions. If you want to see an example of this in the wild, you can see something like this. And I believe I also have a similar citation in my About page, which is what I recommend you do as well. So this is my About page, and here you see a description of what images we used. This is why, as soon as I get started, I am creating a document called Header Citation Information. This is where I'm going to paste all my important information so I don't forget it later, because trust me, it's really annoying if you forget where your images came from. Okay, let's move it along. First step is go to your WordPress dashboard via the WP admin link. And under the Appearance tab, there will be a link that reads Header. Now, in some cases, you might not find this. It's because not all themes actually support custom headers. If that is the case for you, just send me an email and we'll talk about some alternative way of doing it. I've found that if you create a static homepage and use a splash image there, it serves basically the same function as a header, and it's a great alternative. But don't worry about that, until you've gone and taken a look yourself. So let's do that. I am signed into my WordPress here. If I just sign into WordPress.com, this is what I see. And you may remember that last week we talked about the different WP admin menu, which looks like this. It has the dark color on the side, and you get to it by typing in your URL and adding /WP-admin there at the end. So remember, that's really important. We're going to keep using it. So from here, we can go on over to Appearance, and we'll open the Appearance editor, and then we can go to Customize, or in many cases, you'll actually have an area of this submenu that just says Header. You can click Customize or click header, it'll pretty much bring you to the same place. You get to this customize menu, and then you see the area that's saved for header image. What we're looking for here is the size of your required header. So we want to make a note of how big the header needs to be. In this case, it's 1440 by 600 pixels. This is how we make sure that we get source images that are the right size. And I should save this so that I don't lose it later. Okay, we're ready to keep on rolling. Let's consult the instructions, which will tell us, by default, the site will usually keep title text in front of the header image. So that means you don't need to add any text to your banner image. That's just sort of a preface that you realize, like the text is here. We don't need to add any text to the header. Same thing is true here. There's a different theme, but we see they put the text there for us. So we just worry about the image. Okay. After we've noted our image dimensions, we can start finding the source images. So here's my recommendation. This is how I recommend you make an image that is pretty easy to get done, doesn't take too long, doesn't take a ton of complicated editing, but still gets the job done with relative elegance. I suggest that students use one large photo as the background with a smaller image, such as a logo or a close-up, superimposed on top of it to add personality. And to add a little bit of spice from there, I recommend that you work with transparency. It's great if you can get some sort of logo that has a transparent background to begin with, often in PNG format, and that's easy to find through Google. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to demonstrate using Google to find a logo with a clear background, and Pixlr to find a big high-res image, and Flickr to find a big high-res image that goes in the background. That's what I did here. You see one big image with a smaller one in front. It's also what you see here. One big image, smaller one in front. Okay. So from Google Images, we can run a search, and then from the search result page, we'll be able to click Search Tools and filter by usage rights. I have Google Images here, and I'm ready to find an image about websites, since my website is about websites. Ha ha ha. Okay. We have these images. We're going to go to Tools. We're going to filter by usage rights so that we know we're allowed to get whatever we want from the image. We're allowed to alter it if we want. I'm going to go for non-commercial reuse with modification. That's like, the most flexible, useful thing. And then I'm going to filter for, like I was saying, something that is transparent in the background, so that way we can easily superimpose it over other larger images. So we're going to filter by color here and click transparent. Great. And we're not going to get too hung up on trying to pick something that looks super duper cool, because we just need to get the job done, right? So I like this one. It's a picture of a computer and it has a transparent background. This is going to be great for us. I'm going to open it in a new tab. I'm going to right click and save the image. I'll call it website logo 1. I'll put it in the downloads folder. You can put it wherever you want. Just remember where you put it so that you don't get into trouble when you try to find it later. And we'll save it. And then most importantly, I'm going to take the URL of where it came from and put it in my document for the citations, right? So that way I can get back and I can find out what is it called and who made it. You know what? We'll do that now. Sorry, I keep trying to save this thing. Looks like it is by Creaticar. And it looks like it is called, does it have a name? So we refresh here. Looks like the closest we're going to get is web page business internet site. That's close enough, and we'll give everyone the URL so they'll be able to find it for us. Put it in quotations. Web page, website, internet, business by Creaticar. License. And it looks like it is the Pixabay license. Free for commercial use, no attribution required. That's great. We're still going to attribute it anyway because that's just a good practice to be in. And it'll make sense to be in that habit when we get to our next image, which we're going to find through Flickr. So I'll run another search for website, see what we get. And then we'll Flickr filter by Creative Commons. And we'll even go a step further. We'll do Creative Commons modifications allowed. All right. So not all of this actually looks like it's anything to do with websites. That's okay. That might happen to you as well. Sometimes you just need to try another search term. So I'll do computer. We still have modifications allowed filter on. And now we have all these other options. This is great. We have, this is a computer. We have some keyboards, etc. We want to look for something that's like nice and big and we can easily superimpose another logo on top of. All these close-ups of keyboards I think are actually pretty nice for that purpose. Something like this could do us really well. We see that some rights are reserved. We'll click through there and make sure that it's a good license. Okay, it's a Creative Commons license, which should be familiar by now. Attribution, non-commercial, share alike. That's perfect for us. We're not doing commercial work. We plan to attribute. I'm going to copy this and put it in my handy dandy citation document. Okay. There is the license. Let's go back and grab the image itself, which you get by clicking this down arrow. And we see that we can get plenty big. It goes to size 4,000 pixels by 2,000 pixels. If we look back at our size, we need only 1,400 pixels roughly, so that's good. This large wouldn't quite do it, but original is more than enough. So we'll download that. That'll go in our downloads folder. And then we will copy, the name of the person who made this thing. It seems to be Electro Wolf, okay. By Flickr user Electro Wolf. And what is it called? It looks like it is called Eine Tastatur. Tastatur. Maybe that's how you say keyboard in German. Cool. Got it. Okay. Now, let's go back to those instructions. Oh, and we want to make sure we get the URL too. I almost forgot. Grab that URL and paste it here. Nice and long, just the way we like it. Cool. Oop, sorry about that. Okay. Here's a note about fair use. If you read your readings from last week, you know that there are times when there is a decent excuse for using copyrighted material for critique, commentary, education, or satire. So say your website is all about, I don't know, the Marvel Universe, right? I think then you have a good fair use defense to say, no, I need to use these images because I'm offering, you know, real critique and commentary about this franchise. There are rules about how you can do that. You know, you can't just like repost the entire movie, but you can use certain stills. Okay, moving on. We've saved our source images. That's great. We have already used Flickr's Creative Commons search, and we did this. We, say always save the title, photographer, URL, and license. Great, we did that. Just don't forget. Now it is time to edit. We're going to go to this URL here for the Pixlr editor, and there are a few important notes here. Number one, go to the URL directly because Pixlr.com will forward you to these other services that the Autodesk company, that's the developers who make Pixlr, would rather you use. Pixlr.com is a sort of old product, but it hasn't been discontinued yet, and I recommend that you use it because it actually makes your life easier when you need to make certain required adjustments, such as creating an image of a given size. And it's also more closely the classic version modeled after the common Photoshop style interface that we talk about in class. So, when they ask you to activate Flash, just say yes, go for it. You might need to refresh. And when they ask if you want to use a new version of Pixlr, just say no. This is the website you'll see when you visit the URL, pixlr.com. And you'll notice here that there's two options. There's Pixlr X, and then there's Pixlr Editor. Pixlr Editor is the older version, and Pixlr X is brand new, just within the last few months. Pixlr X does have an improved user interface. I quite like it. However, there still are some issues with the product. Support online and tutorials don't really support it widely. There's not a lot of information about it, and it also has some glitches that I've noticed. So some of the tools in it don't work quite correctly like the way they're supposed to. For that reason, I'm going to recommend that you keep using the old-fashioned Pixlr Editor product. It looks like this. You may get some sort of boxes you need to click through, like you see here, where they tell us, look, there's this new thing called Pixlr X or whatever. Do you want it? And I'm just going to say no. I have an ad blocker on, and it says, do you want to whitelist us? I'm going to say no. And then here's the important part. You need to run Adobe Flash. Adobe Flash is a multimedia environment that people used to use in web development in order to get more complex interactive web apps built. They don't really need it anymore because HTML5 is a new standard that supports most of the features people used to use Flash for. And Flash has some security problems. However, unfortunately, the old version of Pixlr Editor requires Flash, and it's okay. I mean, I don't think you need to worry about any security issues on Pixlr because Pixlr is made by Autodesk, which is a reputable software development company that's been in the business for a few decades now. And I've been teaching with Pixlr for several years now, and it's always been okay. So we'll click to run Flash, and we will say we want to allow it when the browser prompts us. Give it a second, and boom, here we go. Welcome to the Pixlr Editor. Now, once you have gotten to the Pixlr Editor, you will create a new image, which will prompt you to put in the size of your image. So I will pull up my document here where it's 1440 by 1600 that I'm looking for, and I will enter that here, 1440 by 600. And I'm going to make it transparent because that has a nice effect where no matter what color your website background is, it'll kind of always match your header somewhat, right? It helps things to sort of sit together nicely, but that's up to you. I just like doing things that are sort of quick, simple, like, you know, get it going nice and quick, and don't think too hard about things like color schemes. And we'll give it a name. We'll just call it SP header S19 for spring 19. Okay, we will click OK, and it will make a canvas of the proper size for us. Now we can start using those things called layers, which we'll read about in the Manovich. So pulling up the instructions here, we can skip across some of these just basic like warnings and notes. And we've already created our new image. We're going to create one of the images as a background. We're going to import it using the top menu bar. We're going to choose layer and then open image as new layer. Obviously make sure that this image is big enough to be the background. In our case, we made sure that it was, right? It was larger than 1400 pixels square, and so we know that it's good. Okay. That is done by, let's check it out again. Choose layer and then open image as new layer. So here's the layer menu, and then here is open image as, that's the one we chose. We'll open it. And we see that the image is like actually too big to fit in this area. So next thing that we can do is what I recommend, sort of just the fastest, quickest thing to do to move stuff around would be either the edit free transform function or the move tool, which is the top right icon in the left toolbar. I'll show you how to just use the free transform because you can actually move things with that as well. Just note that Pixlr will automatically crop your image after you finalize a free transform by pushing enter. Now you can undo this if you need to by going to edit and then undo. And also when you're doing a free transform, the free part of that means that you can, potentially stretch that image out to be any dimension you really want. So you want to be careful not to stretch it or squash it too much. You want to maintain something close to the original aspect ratio. I will show you what I mean now. So we go to edit, and then we can do free transform. We can move the thing around. And now we start to see, okay, those are the keys that we were looking at. And if we pull it all the way down, we can see the edges there. So we'll pull it in, try to maintain the same dimensions and make the thing a little bit smaller. It doesn't need to all fit in the background, it just needs to mostly fit in the background, see? So the image is still bigger than the canvas, but it'll fit, right? And it's not too squashed or too stretched out or whatever. This looks roughly appropriate. And I'm going to push enter to just finalize it. There we go. We have layer 1. Next, and this note just describes what we just did. Next, we'll add our second image. Ideally, it would be smaller than the background, so you can put it kind of wherever you want. And I recommend using a transparent vector image, which we've already gotten, so that way it sits on there really nicely. And the easiest method is to use layer and then open as a new layer, like we just did. Layer, open image as layer. We will sort by date modified, and we have website logo. There we go. Maybe not the coolest combination of looks, but it'll suit our purposes for now. And we can make the thing a little bit smaller and put it over to the side, so that way it's not in the way. You can put it wherever you want. And we'll push enter just to finalize it. So this would fulfill the requirements, right? We have an image in the front, an image in the back. There's some transparency so that the image in the front isn't just a big block of white text. And everything's in separate layers, so we can kind of edit it accordingly. So if we really wanted to, here's where things get cool. We can adjust the opacity of any of these layers as well as their sizes. So let's go back to, say we want to do a free transform. Position things just right, we can kind of like tilt it. I don't know, maybe I'll make it a little bigger. Now that makes it seem like kind of fun, right? And then what I'll do is I'll click this little logo in the bottom left of the layer menu. Say yes, I want to apply the changes. And then we can pull the opacity down a little bit. That just gives us a chance to let things, not be like 100% in your face all the time. And we'll just push enter. That's good enough for here. We'll go down to the background. We'll adjust the opacity a little bit on that one too, which you'll see will, just help it to sit nicely in there once we put it on our actual website. And again, maybe not the coolest thing in the world, but it does suit our requirements. Let's go back to the instructions and get onto these finishing touches. So we click that small square icon, which toggles opacity adjustments. We already did that. Here's just some reminders. And here are some other tools that I find are kind of easy to implement. Once we're done with that, we will export our creation as a JPEG or PNG at the best quality. And I say, use the PNG format if you want to maintain your transparency effects. And then we'll upload our creation to WordPress on the page stipulated in step number 1. In other words, we're going all the way back to, I believe it was this one. Yeah, this is our header image. We'll be able to add a new image there. Although, I just can't stand to make such a crummy looking header, so I'm going to go back to the Google results and I'm going to use this www icon instead. That's a little bit nicer. It only has one color, so it won't clash with anything. So, if I right click this one, it'll open in a new tab here. It's the same as before. We have, the author, we have the license, we have a title. I'll take the URL, put it in my citation document again. I'll overwrite this stuff. And I'll go back and get the rest of the info later. As long as I have the URL, I can always go back and get it. And let's go back to Pixlr. Let's say we wanted to delete a layer. This is useful to know. I click the layer and then I click this little trash logo. Boom, it's gone. Now we can try opening an image as a layer just one more time. Let's use that www icon. Oh yeah, that looks so much better. Okay, free transform this bad boy. Try not to squash it too much. That seems about right. Let's throw it on the side there. And we'll rotate it again because I thought that was pretty cool. And you know what else I'm going to do? Push enter to make that finalized. I'm going to add another one as well, which I believe, yeah, we can just right click and click duplicate layer to get another one. Now we go to the free transform tool again. We grab our duplication. Now we're starting to get somewhere, right? And I'll make this one the reverse. So that way there's some kind of visual synergy going on there, we could call it. And we'll pull the opacity down a little bit on both of them. We'll try to make sure it's roughly even. 71. Put this down to 71 as well. Okay. Now we can file. And I believe we should be able to export. In order to export, we will choose the save option. Save the image. We'll call it SP header spring 19. That's great. JPEG, we talked earlier about using PNGs instead. We'll try to stick with that. And we can click OK. It's going to be called SP header S19. It's going to go in the downloads. Again, doesn't matter where you put it, just want to remember where so you don't lose it later. And now we can go back to our Customize menu, add our new image, select and crop. Since we made our image the right size the first time, there's no need for cropping. So, I mean, click whichever we want here, doesn't matter. And there we go. We have a simple college guide to websites logo now, which sits nicely behind the title. And as I mentioned before, since we mess with the opacity a little bit, the things are not quite so jarring behind that text. It helps to sort of soften the image. We're going to click Publish to finalize that. And why not take a look at what it looks like in the wild. We'll copy that URL, open a new tab, and boom, there's our work. It looks pretty cool. Okay, now we can go back to our instructions and make sure that we finish everything out strong. So we've uploaded, yes. We want to make sure that we cite the sources, and here's another example. Header images by, include a hyperlink. I won't bore you with having you watch me do all of that. But next step will be writing a blog post introducing the header, making your commentary relevant to the topic that your website is about. And you have a reminder about your writing prompt here. I have examples that you can click over to if you want to see student work who did a nice job with this. Here's an example of a student talking about their header. I definitely recommend that you check it out. And don't forget to fill out all of your pages. Make sure that you have your about page and your contact page and all your widgets filled out, all those things that we talked about last week, right? And then you can roll over to this blog post page. And once your blog post is up, you'll be able to submit it here. And again, there's a couple examples in the documentation that you might want to look at. You can pull from the instructions and look at just a writer's block, which I think is great. And I'll also email you out my old example about the NJ Tone Zone, which was about getting good guitar tone for cheap in the tri-state area. Okay. That should cover it for today. As always, if you have any questions, you are welcome to shoot me an email. In the meantime, I hope that you all are ready to get working on week 5. All right, see you later. Good luck.